Imagine this. You wake up late. Your phone is already vibrating with notifications. You scroll through bad news, shallow arguments, and endless demands. You're behind on deadlines. Someone you care about sends a cold message. Traffic slows you to a crawl. You feel it rising. The pressure, the heat, the loss of control. And in that moment, like most men, you want to scream, fight, escape, collapse. The chaos outside starts to infect the inside. Now imagine something else. Imagine standing in that same moment, in the same traffic, with the same stress, the same betrayal, the same uncertainty. But instead of spiraling, you're still, clear, calm. Not because you're pretending, not because you've given up, but because you've trained your mind to stand firm while the world shakes. You've built something inside that cannot be touched from the outside. That's not fantasy. That's Stoicism, a philosophy forged in fire, built by warriors, emperors, and exiles who faced real danger and remained composed. Stoicism was never designed for ivory towers. It was built for men who bled, for men who were tested, for men like you, navigating a modern world that feels louder, faster, and more fragile than ever. And in that world, composure is no longer a luxury. It's a requirement, because when everything around you is designed to provoke, to distract, to break your focus, the man who remains unmoved becomes unstoppable. In this video, you'll discover 11 Stoic lessons that will teach you how to stay calm in chaos. Not through denial, not through detachment, but through absolute inner control. These aren't motivational slogans. They are tools, weapons, shields, the very same truths that helped men like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus survive betrayal, exile, war, and death, while remaining clear-eyed and composed. You're not here to survive the storm. You're here to become the one who walks through it, untouched. Lesson 1. Embrace what you can control. In every man's life, there comes a moment when the world feels like it's slipping through his fingers. No matter how hard he tries to hold on, the job falls apart, the relationship crumbles, the market crashes, or the people he depended on change overnight. And in that moment of helplessness, he often asks, "What did I do wrong?" But the real question, the Stoic question, is different. It's not what happened to me. It's what part of this was mine to command. Epictetus, who began life in chains and ended it teaching emperors, gave us a lesson more powerful than wealth or influence. He said that all of life can be divided into two categories: the things we can control and the things we cannot. Our thoughts, our actions, our values, our decisions, these are ours. But everything else, other people's opinions, external events, luck, fortune, the past, the future, belong to fate, not to us. And yet, this is where most men fall. They burn themselves out trying to control the uncontrollable. They waste years trying to force people to stay, trying to change outcomes they never truly owned, trying to rewrite a future built on variables they can't predict. It's like trying to command the ocean with your hands. Exhausting, futile, and slowly drowning. The Stoic refuses to live like this. Instead, he turns inward. He realizes that calm is not found in having control over the world, but in having control over himself. He doesn't panic in a crisis because his response is the only part of the crisis that he actually owns. He doesn't get rattled by criticism because someone else's judgment has no power unless he gives it permission. He doesn't chase certainty because certainty was never promised to him. What he does chase is excellence in effort, precision in thought, purity in character. The metaphor Epictetus gave us is timeless. Life is like archery. You can aim the bow. You can draw the string. You can practice your technique. You can release the arrow with perfect form. But the moment it leaves your grip, the outcome is no longer yours. Wind, distance, chance, they all play a role. If you measure your success by where the arrow lands, you will be a slave to fortune. But if you measure your success by the quality of your aim and the steadiness of your hand, you are already victorious, whether the arrow hits or not. This is the freedom Stoicism offers. Not freedom from pain or adversity, but freedom from the illusion that the world owes you control. Because once you give up the need to control what isn't yours, you finally reclaim what is: your mind, your actions, your discipline, your peace. And from that place of inner authority, even the most chaotic storm feels manageable. You are no longer reacting to life. You are responding intentionally, consciously, powerfully. So when the world grows loud, when events spiral beyond your reach, remember this first lesson. You are not powerless. You are just focused on the wrong battlefield. Shift your energy inward. Master your responses. Accept what is not yours. And in doing so, you will find a calm that no chaos can ever touch. Lesson 2. The power of acceptance. There is a silent war most men are fighting and losing, not with others, but with reality itself. They wake up each day hoping the world will be fair, that things will go according to plan, that life will honor their expectations. And when it doesn't, when the deal collapses, when betrayal strikes, when sickness comes, when plans fail, they tense, resist, and rage against what already is. But this resistance doesn't solve anything. It only adds a second layer of suffering, the suffering of refusing to accept. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled the most powerful empire in history, while enduring loss, war, and constant pressure, left behind a sentence that defines Stoic resilience. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this, you have the power to revoke. In these words lies the Stoic gateway to peace. You do not control what happens, but you control what it means and how you respond. Acceptance, to the modern mind, is often mistaken for weakness, as if yielding to events means surrendering your strength. But the Stoic knows the opposite is true. Acceptance is not weakness. It is a form of strength so rare, most never find it. Because acceptance requires courage. The courage to face discomfort without numbing yourself. The courage to keep moving forward without the fantasy of control. The courage to live in alignment with what is, instead of clinging to what should have been. Think of the man who loses everything overnight: the job, the relationship, the vision of his future. He can spend months resisting the truth, denying what's happened, blaming the world. Or he can breathe, accept, and ask a different question. And now that this is real, how will I respond? That moment, the moment of quiet acceptance, is where real transformation begins. Because now, he's not a victim anymore. He's a man with clarity. A man who sees the terrain clearly and decides to act, not react. The Stoics compared this mindset to a ship caught in a storm. The fool fights the wind, screaming at the sky, cursing the sea. But the Stoic sailor understands something deeper. You don't control the wind, only the set of your sail. You adjust, you steady yourself. You work with reality, not against it. And by doing so, you move forward, not because the storm disappears, but because you've learned how to sail through it. Acceptance is the gateway to endurance. When you accept the hard truth of a moment, you stop wasting energy pretending it should be something else. You stop bleeding power into fantasies, and that saved energy becomes the fuel for something else: resilience. You become less reactive, more centered, less fragile, more focused. You start to walk with calm, not because the world is calm, but because you've stopped expecting it to be. This is how the Stoic survives and thrives in chaos, not through domination, not through control, but through alignment, through the ability to look fate in the eye and say, if this is what life brings, then this is what I am built to handle. And that calm, that stillness, it doesn't come from things going your way. It comes from accepting them, even when they don't, and refusing to be broken by what lies outside of you. Lesson 3. Master the present moment. In the modern world, distraction isn't an accident, it's the norm. Most men live in a constant state of psychic drift, pulled backward by regret and forward by anxiety. They replay old arguments in the shower. They worry about imaginary futures while staring at the ceiling at night. Even in moments of silence, their minds are noisy. And the tragedy is that while they drift between what was and what might be, they miss the only thing that ever is. This moment, this breath, this now. Seneca, centuries ago, saw this danger. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And today, this warning has become prophecy. Men lose years worrying about conversations they never had, building scenarios that never happened, and nursing wounds that no longer exist. They scroll endlessly, numbing themselves with overstimulation. They work while thinking of rest, and rest while thinking about work. The present moment, the only real ground they stand on, becomes a blur. The Stoic trains himself to resist this pull, not with force, but with awareness. He knows that the mind, like an untrained dog, will chase every sound and shadow if left alone. So he trains it. He disciplines his focus, like a warrior sharpens his blade. Because he understands the truth most ignore. Attention is power. And where your attention goes, your emotions, your energy, and your future will follow. To master the present is not to deny the past or reject the future. It's to refuse to live in them. The Stoic understands that the past is unchangeable, a locked room behind him. The future is unknowable, a door that hasn't opened yet. But the present is a forge. It's where discipline is built, where decisions are made, where strength is formed. Every breath, every glance, every word spoken in presence becomes a weapon against the chaos of unconscious living. Imagine a man stuck in traffic. The average person curses, grips the wheel tighter, checks his phone, tries to distract himself. But the Stoic breathes, he observes. He feels a tightness in his chest, then lets it go. He doesn't waste energy fighting what he can't change. He redirects it inward. In that moment, traffic becomes a training ground, a chance to practice stillness, not a punishment. This is what separates him from the masses. Not that he avoids difficulty, but that he uses it to become more conscious, more composed. Presence is not passive. It is the most active state of living. It means that when you eat, you taste. When you speak, you mean it. When you act, you are all in. No split attention, no fractured thoughts. And in that intensity, life becomes clearer, simpler, more real. The Stoic doesn't need to escape to a mountaintop to find peace. He finds it in the noise by training his focus to pierce through it. To live in the present is to anchor yourself in a storm. While others are pulled by tides of distraction, you remain steady. While others drift into illusion, you respond to what is. You build your power, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet act of being here, fully, deliberately, relentlessly. The mind will wander. That is its nature. But the Stoic always brings it back, again and again, until the now becomes home. Lesson 4. Turn adversity into fuel. Every man has a breaking point, or so he believes. A moment when the weight is too much, the pressure too great, the storm too violent. He thinks, I can't take this. But the Stoic sees it differently. He knows that pain doesn't always break a man. Sometimes it reveals him. Sometimes it burns away the weakness he was clinging to. Sometimes it forces him to confront the truth that everything he wants, discipline, power, self-respect, lies on the other side of discomfort. Epictetus, who lived in chains and walked with a twisted leg, taught that adversity is not a curse. It is a mirror. It reflects back to you the state of your character. Anyone can appear calm when life is easy, but when things fall apart, when betrayal strikes, when plans collapse, when death knocks on your door, then your true nature is exposed. And for the Stoic, this exposure is not humiliation. It is opportunity. He welcomes adversity, not because he is a masochist, but because he understands its utility. Hardship is the forge in which virtue is shaped. You don't build courage by avoiding fear. You build it by walking through it. You don't gain resilience by being pampered. You earn it by enduring storms without flinching. You don't become composed by running from pressure. You become composed by standing inside it and choosing clarity over chaos. Modern life has made weakness look reasonable. People fold at the smallest friction. A missed text becomes a crisis. A negative comment ruins their week. A single failure leads them to question their worth. But the Stoic is not so fragile. He doesn't break over small things because he has trained in the fire of bigger things. He understands that adversity isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it is a gift in disguise, an invitation to rise. Imagine a man whose business fails. His savings disappear. His reputation takes a hit. The average person would retreat, complain, look for someone to blame. But the Stoic pauses. He breathes. He asks a sacred question. What is this here to teach me? And instead of falling apart, he begins rebuilding. Not because he's immune to pain, but because he knows how to turn pain into purpose. That's the difference. Adversity doesn't build the Stoic because he is special. It builds him because he allows it to. He doesn't let hardship define him. He uses it. He treats every difficulty like raw material. Disrespect becomes a lesson in patience. Loss becomes a teacher of detachment. Pressure becomes a gym for his willpower. The Stoic doesn't resist the fire. He steps into it and becomes fire himself. The world tells you to avoid pain, to stay comfortable, to protect your peace. But Stoicism tells you the opposite. Not because pain is good in itself, but because your strength is hiding inside it. If you run from hardship, you remain small. If you face it, eyes open, fists clenched, heart steady, you transform. And eventually, you stop fearing adversity altogether. Because you've seen what it does, it sharpens you. So when life turns against you, when it tests your limits and strikes at your pride, don't ask for it to be easier. Ask yourself how you can become stronger. The Stoic doesn't break when life gets hard. He becomes harder, sharper, calmer, more dangerous, because he has trained himself to use every blow as a lesson and every fall as a reason to rise. Lesson 5. Choose your response. There's a dangerous lie circulating in the modern world. The belief that our emotions must dictate our behavior. That if we feel anger, we must lash out. That if we feel fear, we must retreat. That if someone disrespects us, we are justified in abandoning our values. But the Stoic sees this lie for what it is: a surrender, a quiet forfeiting of your most sacred power, the power to choose your response. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave, was not unfamiliar with pain or humiliation. But even in his lowest state, he made a discovery that would become the cornerstone of Stoic strength. We are disturbed not by events, but by the views which we take of them. And within that sentence is a code for unshakable control. The world may strike, but it cannot define your reaction. That is yours, always. Modern men are constantly reacting. A sideways glance, a rude comment, a delay in a text reply, and suddenly, they're spiraling. They raise their voice in traffic. They drown themselves in distraction. They fire off angry messages they later regret. But this is not power. This is slavery to impulse. This is a man who has built nothing inside himself, strong enough to interrupt the wave of emotion that crashes over him. He is not leading his life. He is being led by it. The Stoic does something radically different. He pauses. He recognizes the rising heat of anger, the quick tightening of the chest, the flush of pride or fear. But instead of reacting blindly, he inserts space, a breath, a moment of clarity. And in that space, he asks the question that separates the immature from the composed. What would the best version of me do right now? Not the scared version, not the reactive version, the disciplined one, the man he is training to become. That single moment, that breath between stimulus and action, is where freedom lives. And in that space, the Stoic chooses his next move. He doesn't allow his ego to hijack the moment. He doesn't defend his emotions like sacred truths. He acts from principle, not provocation. And that response, grounded, deliberate, measured, becomes a foundation of a reputation that cannot be faked. People begin to see it in him. That quiet restraint, that unspoken authority, that invisible armor made of will. Imagine being humiliated in front of others, mocked, challenged, baited. The room is watching. The animal inside you wants blood. But the Stoic sees it differently. He sees the trap. He sees how reacting with rage would only prove the other man right. He understands that silence, composure, and an unwavering stare can sometimes shake the earth more than shouting ever could. He may speak, or he may not. But what he will not do is give his control away. This isn't about being cold. It's not about being numb. It's about being so centered in your values, so grounded in your philosophy, that no outside force, not disrespect, not betrayal, not chaos, can pull you away from the man you've chosen to be. The Stoic trains for this every day, in the small moments. He doesn't wait for a crisis to start practicing control. He builds it daily, like a craftsman sharpens a blade. So when the real test comes, his composure is already instinct. Because in the end, composure is not a reaction. It's a decision. And the man who can make that decision, moment after moment, regardless of circumstance, becomes something rare in the modern world. Not passive, not aggressive, but sovereign. He doesn't follow emotion, he leads it. And from that place, He becomes immune to manipulation, free from the chaos of others, and quietly feared by those who hoped to control him. That's the gift of Stoicism, not to feel nothing, but to be master of what you feel, to act without compromise, and to carry yourself like a man who has already won the battle within. Lesson 6. Limit excessive desires. A man can look successful on the outside and still be starving on the inside. He can have power, money, followers, luxury, and yet remain agitated, unsatisfied, restless, because what enslaves him is not scarcity, but excess. He has more than he needs, but it's never enough. His mind is loud, his spirit is hungry, and no amount of consumption can silence the craving. This is the hidden prison of modern man, a prison not made of walls, but of unchecked desire. Seneca understood this long before smartphones and social media ever existed. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, he wrote. And nowhere is this more obvious than in our craving for more attention, more pleasure, more recognition, more status. The Stoic sees this not as ambition, but as a kind of sickness, a disease of the soul that convinces a man that happiness lies just beyond the next thing. And every time he gets it, it moves further out of reach. This is why the Stoic deliberately limits desire, not because he's against pleasure, not because he's weak, but because he knows that the mind that is always reaching can never be still. He doesn't chase pleasure for its own sake, because he knows that what you chase eventually owns you. The craving becomes the leash, the object becomes the master, and the man becomes small, no matter how big his achievements appear. Think of desire like fire. In small doses, it provides warmth and motivation, but unchecked, it burns the whole house down. It destroys discipline, poisons peace, and clouds judgment. The Stoic tends this fire carefully. He knows that not every appetite deserves to be fed. He knows that some pleasures are traps in disguise, momentary highs followed by long-term emptiness. He doesn't fear pleasure. He simply refuses to be ruled by it. In today's world, that's a radical act. We are bombarded with messages that tell us we are always missing something. Ads, algorithms, influencers, all promising that if you just buy this, earn that, achieve one more milestone, then you'll feel whole. But the Stoic sees through the illusion. He knows that desire without boundaries becomes noise, and noise is the enemy of clarity. Imagine walking into a room filled with flashing lights, loud music, and endless distractions. That's how most men live inside their own minds. The Stoic, by contrast, walks into that same room and turns the volume down. He strips away the excess. He simplifies. He chooses stillness over stimulation. And in doing so, he begins to hear himself again. His values, his direction, his inner compass. This is not a rejection of the world. It is mastery of the self. The Stoic doesn't need to escape to a cave. He can walk through the marketplace, through the noise, through temptation, and remain undisturbed, not because he denies himself everything, but because he has trained himself to want only what is necessary. And in that discipline, he finds a kind of power the world cannot offer, peace without dependence. The man who limits his desires becomes dangerous, not in aggression, but in indifference to manipulation. He can't be bought. He can't be baited. He's not chasing anything, which means he cannot be led astray. And while others are constantly pulled by wants they don't understand, the Stoic walks in stillness because he has learned that the less he needs, the freer he becomes. Lesson 7. Be virtuous. In a world obsessed with outcomes, the Stoic turns inward and focuses on character. He doesn't chase applause. He doesn't measure himself by how many people follow him, or how much money he earns, or how often he wins. He measures himself by who he becomes in the process. And that's where Stoic composure finds its roots, not in technique, but in virtue. To the ancient Stoics, virtue wasn't some abstract ideal for saints and philosophers. It was the essence of strength. Epictetus said that if you want to be invincible, don't aim for things that lie outside your control. Aim to live virtuously, and no one can touch your peace. Virtue is the one thing no man can give you, and no man can take away. The Stoics defined 4 core virtues: wisdom, the ability to judge rightly and see clearly; courage, the will to face what must be faced; justice, the choice to do what is fair, no matter the cost; and temperance, the restraint to avoid excess and stay grounded. These are not decorative ideas. They are weapons for men who wish to be unbreakable. Wisdom is where it begins. The wise man doesn't react, he reflects. He doesn't get seduced by appearances or thrown off by emotion. He studies himself the way a warrior studies his opponent, with honesty and focus. He looks at situations not as they appear at first glance, but as they truly are. And because of that clarity, his decisions carry weight. He doesn't waste time chasing illusions or feeding drama. His mind is clean, and therefore, so is his life. Courage is what puts wisdom into action, because clarity without boldness is nothing more than comfort, dressed up as intelligence. The Stoic knows that most people fear discomfort more than failure, and that's why they never grow. But he chooses differently. He speaks when silence would be safer. He moves forward when fear says, stay back. He faces pain without flinching, not because he's numb, but because he's trained himself to value growth more than safety. Courage sharpens the soul. Justice is the rarest virtue in a self-centered world. It is not merely following laws. It's living by an internal standard of fairness, even when no one sees. The Stoic does not manipulate, cheat, or cut corners. He does not need to take from others to feel powerful. He serves what is right, not because it's profitable, but because it's sacred. When faced with injustice, he speaks. When given the opportunity to benefit from corruption, he walks away. His peace cannot be built on the pain of others. And temperance, perhaps the most undervalued virtue today, is where discipline is born. In a society drowning in indulgence, the Stoic practices restraint. He controls his appetites, his spending, his attention. He doesn't chase every impulse or follow every craving, because he understands the more you indulge, the weaker you become. The man who can master his desires, who can say no when the world begs him to say yes, that man walks through fire without being burned. He is free. Together, these virtues form the Stoic's armor. They protect him not from pain, but from corruption of the self. They give him a compass when the world is spinning. They keep him grounded when emotions rise, and steady when chaos strikes. The man who lives by virtue is not perfect, but he is deliberate. His peace doesn't come from outside validation. It comes from knowing he stood firm in his principles when others folded. That is the ultimate strength. To walk through life with a conscience that does not shake, a mind that does not lie to itself, and a soul that remains clean, even in a dirty world. When you become virtuous, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to pretend. You don't need to dominate. You already possess the one thing every man wants: but few ever earn: inner respect. Lesson 8. Understand the transitory nature of life. Most men walk through life like it's permanent. They speak as if tomorrow is promised. They make plans assuming time will wait for them. But beneath all that noise lies a quiet truth that Stoicism never lets us forget. Everything you see, touch, and love is temporary. Nothing lasts. Not your body, not your wealth, not your status, not even the people closest to you. And the man who refuses to accept this lives in constant fear, because he's built his peace on a crumbling foundation. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, faced this truth every day. He buried children. He watched friends betray him. He ruled an empire he knew would one day forget his name. And yet, he did not despair. He wrote in his meditations, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." He wasn't being poetic. He was training his soul to face the truth that most men run from. Life is slipping through your fingers, whether you're ready or not. To understand this is not to become numb. It is to become awake. The Stoic doesn't grieve the nature of impermanence. He honors it. Because in the temporary, he finds the essential. When you realize that everything you love could disappear at any moment, you start paying attention. You speak with more care. You waste less time. You love harder. You forgive faster. You begin to live, not with panic, but with precision. Think of life like sand pouring through your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it falls away. But if you open your palm, if you hold it gently and observe its texture, you'll feel something deeper, the weight of time itself. You'll realize that each grain is a moment, a person, a chance, and that your only job is to be fully present while you have it. That is how the Stoic lives, not clinging, not resisting, but embracing, fiercely completely, and then letting go when the time comes. This is why the Stoic is unshaken by loss, not because it doesn't hurt, but because he expected it. He trained for it. He understood from the beginning that nothing was his to keep. His peace doesn't come from possession. It comes from alignment with nature, with truth, with the rhythm of the universe. And in that rhythm, he finds freedom. Because if everything is temporary, then suffering is too. So is pain, so is grief, and so too are joy and pleasure. All of it is passing, and that means you don't have to hold so tightly anymore. In a world that worships permanence, forever homes, forever relationships, forever youth, the Stoic becomes radical. He doesn't resist change. He doesn't demand guarantees. He doesn't beg life to slow down. He simply walks with open eyes, knowing that everything is borrowed and the return date is unknown. And this doesn't make him cold. It makes him grateful, because he sees the miracle in what is here, now. So when things fall apart, when people leave, when health fades, when chapters end, the Stoic doesn't scream at the sky. He bows his head and says, "I'm grateful I got to hold it for as long as I did." And then, with that quiet strength, he steps forward, not with regret, but with reverence. Lesson 9. Practice gratitude in all things. Most people think gratitude is something you feel after life gives you what you want. You get the job, you're grateful. You hear good news, you're grateful. You have a peaceful day, you say thanks. But this kind of gratitude is reactive. It's fragile. It depends on external conditions staying in your favor. And the moment things turn, when you lose, when you're hurt, when the storm rolls in, that shallow gratitude disappears like smoke. But the Stoic builds something stronger. He builds gratitude that doesn't bend with the weather. Seneca taught that a wise man is grateful, not because things go his way, but because he has trained himself to see value in whatever comes his way. The Stoic is not waiting for life to meet his expectations before he gives thanks. He gives thanks first because he knows that every moment contains something worth appreciating. Not always something enjoyable, not always something easy, but something useful, something true. This kind of gratitude is not a soft feeling. It is a weapon, a way of seeing the world that makes you immune to bitterness. In a culture that tells men they're only as good as their results, their image, their external wins, Stoic gratitude is rebellion. It says, even when I don't get what I want, I still have everything I need because I still have the chance to grow. Imagine waking up with a tight chest, a heavy mind, facing problems that feel like they're pressing down on your lungs. Most men curse the day. They check their phones, compare their lives, and spiral into scarcity. But the Stoic does something else. He pauses, he breathes, and he gives thanks. For the strength to face another test, for the clarity to see through illusions, for the chance to sharpen his soul in difficulty. His gratitude is not soft. It is steel in the spine. True gratitude doesn't depend on circumstances. It transcends them. That's what makes it powerful. That's why the Stoic practices it, not just in triumph, but in trial. When he is betrayed, he says thank you. For the lesson in trust, when he is rejected, he says thank you. For the redirection towards something better, when he is delayed, disappointed, disrespected, he still gives thanks because he sees something that most men miss. Every moment is an invitation to grow or to shrink, and he refuses to waste any of it. This isn't delusion, it's discipline. Gratitude becomes a lens that filters chaos and extracts meaning. It silences entitlement, kills comparison, and anchors the mind in what is real. Because when you are grateful for what is, you are no longer addicted to what might be. You are no longer blinded by what you think you lack. You can see clearly again, and in that clarity, peace returns. But Stoic gratitude isn't only for hardship. It sharpens your vision in moments of joy, too. It teaches you not to overlook the sacred in the ordinary. The sun on your skin, the silence of early morning, the sound of someone who loves you, laughing across the room. Most people miss these moments because they're chasing something bigger. But the Stoic sees them for what they are, the real gold. Gratitude doesn't make you passive. It makes you present. And from that presence, you make better choices. You speak with more integrity. You listen with more care. You carry yourself with more weight because you're no longer reacting to life's highs and lows. You're grounded in something deeper, a disciplined awareness that nothing is owed, everything is borrowed, and every breath is a gift. The Stoic doesn't just feel grateful, he lives grateful. And that, more than anything, is what gives him composure in a world addicted to complaints. Lesson 10. Commit to lifelong self-improvement. A sword is not born sharp. It is shaped, beaten, tempered in fire, over and over again. And even when it looks complete, it still needs care. It rusts without maintenance. It dulls without friction. It becomes dangerous to its wielder if neglected. The Stoic views his character the same way, as a weapon, as something that must be forged daily, not once, not occasionally, but constantly. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly." And that's why the Stoic never asks, "How long will this take?" He asks, "What can I do today to become a little more precise, a little more composed, a little more aligned with virtue?" He knows that self-improvement isn't a side project. It's the main task. It's the fire he walks into willingly, because he understands. The man who avoids a fire remains soft. Most people want results, not refinement. They want transformation without friction. They chase motivation instead of mastery. But the Stoic builds differently. He's not interested in trends, hacks, or quick wins. He's interested in who he's becoming when no one's watching. He measures himself not by what he has, but by what he can endure, resist, and release. Imagine a blacksmith. Every day, he returns to the same forge. He places the raw iron in fire, hammers it into form, cools it, tests its strength, then begins again. That's how the Stoic treats his own mind and spirit. Every day is a return to the forge. He examines his weaknesses, not with shame, but with hunger. He seeks the rough edges. He welcomes the discomfort, because he knows the parts of him that resist the most. That's where the real work lives. And the deeper he goes, the more he sees that the world will never stop throwing distractions, temptations, and tests. But he no longer resents this. He uses it. Each failure becomes data. Each insult becomes a chance to practice restraint. Each mistake becomes a reason to recalibrate. He is not afraid of being wrong. He is only afraid of staying the same. To the Stoic, self-improvement is not about adding. It's about stripping away. Like a sculptor with a block of marble, he doesn't create the figure by piling on clay. He reveals it by removing what doesn't belong. Ego, laziness, excuses, weakness. The chisel is daily effort. The hammer is truth. And the hand that holds both is virtue. And in time, what remains is something rare. A man who does not depend on circumstance to feel strong. A man who is calm, not because his life is easy, but because he has made himself difficult to disturb. He does not fear pressure. He sharpens himself with it. He does not hide from criticism. He invites it, absorbs what's useful, discards what's petty. Because he's not building a mask, he's building a man. This is the quiet truth of Stoic composure. It is not granted. It is earned through sweat, reflection, humility, and repetition. Day after day, strike after strike. And the moment you think the work is done is the moment you start to dull. That's why the Stoic keeps carving. Not because he is broken, but because he is becoming. Lesson 11. Remember, you're part of the whole. Most men live as if they are alone, cut off, isolated, struggling in silence. They think their pain is unique, their fears are singular, their problems are theirs alone to bear. But the Stoic sees through this illusion. He knows that he is not an island. He is a thread in the fabric of something far greater. And this awareness doesn't weaken him. It grounds him. It humbles him. It heals him. The Stoics call this idea sympatheia, the understanding that everything is connected, that no man suffers or succeeds in total isolation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." He saw himself not just as a ruler, but as a servant to the greater order, to nature, to humanity, to the cosmos itself. This is not some soft, spiritual concept. This is strategy, because when you realize you are part of something larger, a city, a family, a timeline, a species, your problems shrink, your ego softens, your perspective expands. The betrayal still hurts, the setback still stings, but it no longer consumes you. Because you understand, you are not the center of the universe, and that is a gift. The Stoic knows that every man suffers, that every man loses, struggles, fails, fears, that every man is tested, and from that shared struggle, he draws compassion. He becomes less reactive, less judgmental, less self-pitying, not because he's weak, but because he sees clearly. We are all made of the same fragile material, and we are all trying to stand upright in a world that offers no guarantees. This is why the Stoic does not indulge in resentment. He doesn't dehumanize his enemies. He doesn't isolate in his pain. He reaches for a higher view, one that says, they too are acting from ignorance, fear, habit. And that doesn't excuse behavior, but it frees the Stoic from being poisoned by it. He learns to act with virtue, not because others deserve it, but because he refuses to be dragged down by what they lack. When you understand that you're part of a larger whole, composure becomes natural. You stop obsessing over the small disturbances. You stop demanding perfection from people, from the world, from yourself. You start moving in rhythm with life instead of resisting it. You begin to see your role, your duty, your moment, and you play it with clarity and grace. Imagine zooming out from your life, your city, your timeline, until you see yourself as a single point in an unfolding pattern far beyond your comprehension. That image isn't meant to make you feel small. It's meant to liberate you. Because when you realize that the universe is vast, ever-changing, interconnected, and indifferent to your ego, you stop clinging to every slight, every win, every loss. You simply do your part and do it well. This is how the Stoic keeps calm in chaos. He doesn't isolate, he aligns. He sees himself not as a star of his own private drama, but as a man playing a role in something vast, ancient, and alive. And that perspective, it dissolves arrogance, it softens pain, it creates strength without aggression, humility without weakness, and peace without passivity. The Stoics didn't need perfect conditions to stay calm, because they weren't waiting for the world to behave. They weren't bargaining with fate. They weren't building peace on the sand of external outcomes. Their calm came from within, forged through discipline, sharpened through loss, tested in fire. They didn't escape hardship. They embraced it, not with naive optimism, but with eyes wide open. They accepted death, betrayal, failure, and impermanence, and still chose to respond with strength, with clarity, with purpose, because they knew the truth most men avoid. You don't rise by wishing for ease. You rise by choosing how you show up when nothing is certain. Look around. The modern world is noisy, fast, addicted to reaction. Outrage is currency. Weakness is camouflaged as entitlement. Men are taught to blame, to complain, to break down under pressure. But the Stoic rejects that script. He doesn't react just to feel powerful. He doesn't shout just to be heard. He disciplines himself so deeply that even in chaos, his character holds the line. This is not about being emotionless. It's about being anchored in virtue, anchored in truth, anchored in something solid, while the rest of the world drowns in distraction. And that anchor is not handed to you. You build it. You earn it through practice, reflection, and the daily rejection of weakness. So now ask yourself, quietly, seriously, when pressure rises, will you act or will you react? When everything goes wrong, will you reach for blame Or will you return to principle? When the noise gets loud, will you add to it? Or will you be the stillness that others can't shake? Because that's what Stoicism offers. Not protection from life, but the power to walk through it untouched. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more Stoic wisdom. See you in the next video.